So welcome back. In this short video, I will illustrate how to apply general Bayes formula in a problem. So this whole table and the description is the information given to you, and here is the question that you need to answer. First, about the table. The situation is you have a manufacturer of certain product and he receives supplies from different suppliers. So in column 1, it says this manufacturer receives supplies from 6 different suppliers. Nobody else. How do I know nobody else? Because if you look at this one, this is the items received by the manufacturer from various suppliers. It looks like 5% come from supplier 1, 12% comes from supplier 2, 16% of the items to manufacture comes from supplier 3, and so on and so forth. So if you add all these numbers, it's 100%. So that tells us that this manufacturer receives supplies only from these 6 suppliers. Okay, that's one. Now, when somebody supplies material or items, some of them could be defective, right? So the next column tells you from supplier 1, among the items that manufacturer receives, probably 4% of them are defective. From supplier 2, 2% are defective. Supplier 3, 7% are defective, and so on and so forth. So all this information is given to you in a table. Now the question. The question is, find the probability that a defective item came from supplier 5. So this manufacturer, once he receives all the supplies for a given period, he picks one of them, a defective one. Now they're asking, what are the chances that this defective item came from supplier 5? That's the question we have to answer. So to answer this, we have to apply Bayes' theorem. And for Bayes' theorem, as I mentioned in my previous video, it's tough to memorize the formula. It is really complicated formula to remember. Especially there are 6 branches here to begin with. Therefore, it's a good idea to draw a tree diagram, and then from that it's easy to write down the Bayes formula. So I want you to understand this. So let's try to draw the tree diagram here. So starting point, so this is the starting dot, and there are 6 suppliers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there are 6 branches here, 1 from each supplier. Now, on these branches, write down the probabilities. So supplier 1 provides 5% of the material to the manufacturer. So this is 0.05. The next one is 0.12, 0.16, 0.23, 0.35, 0.09. So you might ask, how do I know which one to start with? Here on these branches, you have 6 branches here. If you add all of them, you should get 1. So that is the case here. These probabilities don't add up to 1, okay? That's why these things come first. And these are mutually exclusive, and all these numbers add up to 1. That's the main criteria here. Now, another branch. Follow this. If you follow this path here, what's the probability that supplier 1 gives a defective item? Okay, supplier 1 gives a defective item. That is 0.04. Supplier 2 gave you a defective item, that's 0.02. Given the item came from 3, what's the probability it's defective? 0.07. This is 0.01. That is 0.03. The last one is 0.05. And there might be other branches. For example, you could have another branch saying not defective, but we know that. These two should add up to 1. But we really don't care about those. So write down all the probabilities in the second column. Those are the defective items. The D stands for defective. Now you got to compute the probability on each path. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paths. You got to compute probability of each path. So if you want to compute probability of each path, you got to multiply the probabilities on each branch. So here the probability is 0.5 times 0.04. And here the probability is 0.12 times 0.02. Okay, can you see that? Let me move this a little bit. Okay, now you can see those. Here the probability of 0.16 times 0.07. Here the probability is 0.23 times 0.01. Here the probability is 0.35 times 0.01. And here the probability of is 0.09 times 0.05. So I multiplied all these probabilities. Now, if you look at this one, this 0.03 is given that it came from supplier 5, the defective item is the probability is 0.03. So this probability is really P of D given 5. Probability of D given 5. Given that the item came from supplier, what's the probability? The question is asking find probability of 5D. Given that it is defective, what are the chances it came from supplier 5? So the exactly opposite of this they're asking. Okay? So for that you have to use the Bayes theorem. So what's the Bayes theorem here? To compute this number, you go to that should be in the top, that number, and the sum of the remaining all 6 should be in the bottom. So really this probability is 0.035 times 0.35 times 0.01 divided by all 6, sum of all 6. Sum of all 6. That's Bayes theorem. What 6? These 6. That will give you the probability. I like you to compute that number. Therefore, in general, the way this works is they will ask you to compute opposite of one of these probabilities, opposite. So here it is D5, you're supposed to compute 5D. So again, the formula is the D5 goes in the top and all the numbers, including D5, this one goes in the bottom, sum. And that's the probability, okay? And I want you to compute this, and that's the answer. Thank you.